Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's program from the UC Master Food Preserver online delivery program. My name is Robin Martin. I am the co-host or the MC for tonight's program on preserving zucchini, sweet and savory possibilities, A to Z. So today's program we have myself, our Q&A moderator, who is Mary Timar. We have panelists, Tim Long, Errol Week, Sarah Donaldson, Dee Pennington, and Marina Shea. And this program is being recorded. It will be posted on our website, and a link to a handout with the recipes for this class, which you're going to definitely want, is going to be provided after you submit the post-class Zoom survey. So just some basic housekeeping. We are going to ask everybody to keep them muted when you're not speaking. And then during the live questions, you can unmute and speak. But we're going to have a pretty big crowd, it looks like, potentially here today. So it's better if you use the raise your Zoom hand feature. And then at any time, you can use the Zoom Q&A feature. So you should have this icon in your menu bar at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it, you can click the three dots for more, and then you can select the Q&A from the pop-up menu. You can do that at any time during the presentations as a question comes up. Another thing is in the menu, you can uh, choose a language for your transcript if you would like to follow along in a different language. So what is our mission? The UC Master Food Preserver's mission is to keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate, research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. Our program is a community outreach online-based volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and we provide up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. So we are volunteers who cannot speak for the University of California. We don't endorse or oppose any specific organization, product, or service on behalf of the UC, and any equipment, product, or anything that we show, use, or mention is only for illustrative purposes. We're not going to read this fine print, but we just want to emphasize these 2 points. We can't speak for the university. Today's program, we're starting with some zucchini basics. We're going to move into drying zucchini. We're going to talk about freezing zucchini and some great recipes. Canning a sweet ginger marmalade. The secret ingredient is zucchini, and then canning a savory zucchini relish. So without further ado, let's move into Tim's presentation on zucchini basics.
All right. Fun fact here. Let's get us started. Have you ever heard of National Zucchini Day? It's also known as National Sneak Some Zucchini Onto Your Neighbor's Porch Day. And it's celebrated annually on August 8th. That's this coming Saturday, folks. So little information about it. Its purpose is really a fun, lighthearted way for gardeners to share their overwhelming supply of extra green squash. Leaving excess zucchini anonymously on a neighbor's front porch under the cover of darkness, of course. And how do you celebrate it? Well, drop off fresh vegetables for your friends, family, or neighbors. Cook and bake. Make classic treats like zucchini bread, muffins, grilled squash, or zucchini noodles. Donate or give the extra produce to a local food bank. Okay, next. Now, a little information about zucchini. Zucchini is actually a very popular summer squash. And there are lots of kinds of squash. Zucchini itself, it's treated, it is a fruit that is treated like a vegetable. Zucchini contain the photos on the left are three pretty typical zucchinis that you would see at farmers market or in the store. There's a black beauty zucchini in the upper left. Next to it, to its right, is a white zucchini. And below that is my favorite for growing in my garden, the Italian striped zucchini. There are also other colors, such as a yellow zucchini. Continuing on, zucchini contains large amounts of water. Freezing causes the water crystals to break down cell walls, yielding a watery product when it's thawed and heated. As a result, frozen and thawed zucchini works best in products that are baked. If watery when it's thawed, discard the liquid before using the zucchini unless the liquid is needed for whatever recipe you are using it in. Grated zucchini that is frozen without blanching will typically continue to experience enzyme changes and could become tough. Plain zucchini is not suitable for canning because the high temperature in a pressure canner, remember this is a low acid food, so it would have to be pressure canned, causes the watery squash to disintegrate and become basically mush. And it's as a low acid food, zucchini is not safe to can in a boiling water bath. Because of this, no canning procedures or processing times have been established for processing plain zucchini or other types of summer squash. The National Center for Home Food Preservation does have a research-based recipe for pressure canning tomatoes with zucchini. Adding vinegar to zucchini makes it a high acid food suitable for water bath or atmospheric steam canning. Examples of this would be pickles and relishes. The sugar and the vinegar in the recipes help to keep the zucchini firm. Zucchini is frequently an ingredient in end of the garden pickles or chow chow. It's often difficult to distinguish these products from those made with cucumbers. Dried zucchini, which are chips that you see in the photo to the left, and summer squash both make nice vegetable chips for dips. However, dried squash absorbs moisture from the air and quickly loses its crisp quality. Therefore, do not remove the dried squash from its storage container until you are ready to serve it. Now, these can be chips like this can be dehydrated in either a regular dehydrator or they could be freeze dried if you happen to own one of those types of machines. They can be seasoned, um, and I believe one of our presenters will talk a little bit about that. So at this point, I think it's time to move on and get into our presentation on various types of preserving zucchini.
Okay, I want to start by saying a few things about uh, making sure that your area is clean before you start with any kind of food processing. And remember that you've got a problem with microorganisms and they cause accelerated storage problems. And another problem is illness, such as salmonella and also listeria. Those are two bacteria. And of course, we could mention a number of other bacteria. So the next slide, in terms of talking about clean, of course, you want to start out and have a clean area. Make sure your surfaces are clean, and that includes your telephone and anything else you're going to try to touch. Sometimes you may want to just set that stuff aside and not bring it into the baking area if you can. You want to tie back your hair and use an apron. And you want to gather your utensils and ingredients and then wash your product before you start. Okay, next slide. Okay, what I have here is a picture of my garden, which shows zucchini on either side of the finished product, which is in the center. So one of the problems I had is I used to grow round zucchini, and it was grown next to a regular zucchini. And of course, eventually I always keep seeds, and the seeds that I now have crossed over, so I no longer have round zucchini. So what do we want to do today is we want to talk about dehydrating the zucchini. We want to talk about making chips and using it in soups and also zucchini flour. Next slide. Okay, for dehydrating or to make dried zucchini, you can use a dehydrator. And what I have here is just a little dehydrator picture that I have been using. Now, a dehydrator has a heat source in it and then also a blower. And so what you're doing is blowing warm air through the product. And that will then, of course, dry out the product. And of course, we've already talked about clean areas, but we want to talk about the preparation of the zucchini for drying. And you want to make strips out of it, like a 1/4 inch. And this shows the size zucchini that we used. And you can see that on the left-hand side, we have the zucchini before it's dried. And then on the other side, we have it dried. Now, the way I set my dehydrator is about 130 degrees, and we actually did it overnight. And you can see that that's a very dry chunk of zucchini or chunks of zucchini that I have left. Next slide. Okay, so this is another way you can use or make the chips. And this is actually the chips where we've put spice and different kinds of treatments on them. Now, I didn't really come up with a real good combination, and I'm sure many of you are creative and have your own kinds of spices that you like. But you can more or less just put those on top of the zucchini and then put it in your dehydrator, and you'll get something like this. In fact, I have here a little jar. Let's see if I get that right. Well, let's get there we go. Okay, this is a little jar of zucchini, and it actually is dried that I did a few weeks ago. Okay, next slide. We're not going to really give you a recipe for soup, but I'm sure many of you have your great and one of the really nice soups that you make. Now, my soups tend to be what we call refrigerator soups. So what I find in the refrigerator ends up in the soup. Now, the great thing about the zucchini chips is that you can actually include those zucchini chips in your soup. And oftentimes, what happens is that during the summer, okay, you have plenty of zucchini. So you just slice it and put it into the soup. But during the winter, you'll have to go to something else, such as this dehydrated zucchini that you have. And you can just add that into the existing soup, probably give it a little bit more simmering time and make sure that it dissolves. You may have to break those pieces. And of course, one thing I didn't really mention before, one of the things we look for is to make sure we have completely dried out the zucchini chip. And so it's not going to bend, it's going to break. Okay, next slide. Well, the next slide we have is zucchini flour. Now, since we have a really dry zucchini chip, we can actually put those into like a coffee mill or a food processor and grind that into a powder. And that's what you see here on this slide is actually the zucchini flour. Now, of course, if you're actually in a milling operation, you'd go through different kinds of sifting. But with this, we just make sure that we grind it and make sure that we have a real fine powder. And this will almost produce a dust. Okay, next slide. Let me show you how we use the zucchini flour. Well, we made chocolate chip zucchini cookies. And this is actually a recipe that I started using many years ago when I was working at one of the historical farms here in the Bay Area. And we used to always make this chocolate chip cookie. Now, this is actually a formulation that you can find on your oatmeal package. And of course, it's on usually on the back of the package or the top of the package. They actually call it the Amazing Oatmeal Raisin Cookie. What we've done here is the two changes is we replaced 1/3 of the flour with zucchini flour and we put chocolate chips, took the raisins out because I like chocolate chips better than raisins. Okay, next slide. Okay, this more or less shows the process that we went through to make zucchini cornbread. And again, you're going to find a cornbread recipe usually on your cornmeal box. And in the very first slide that you see here on the left, it actually shows the white flour, which is, of course, wheat flour, regular flour, then corn flour at the very top, and then the zucchini flour over at the other side. And of course, one of the first steps you want to do when you make this is to mix all of those together. And there will also be some leavening in there. And then what you have in the last slide on the right is actually the liquids that go into this. Okay, next slide. Well, this shows more or less, well, this shows the formulation. And in addition, it actually shows what the finished dough looks like. And then it also shows a plate. Okay, questions?
Yeah, hi Tim. We have a couple of questions for you. One of them is, as you're speaking, does all of this apply to yellow squash too?
We only worked with a regular squash.
Okay.
So I only use the squash that I have. And for example, if I can show you this and I can get it in focus, this is one of the squashes that I have.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I will take a hand, and Anya's hand is up. Thank you. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. Just a general question for anybody who kind of cooks the chips, the zucchini chips. What would your favorite seasoning blends be? Like, just we can early we're last talking, so just get your opinion.
Well, that's really, I think, an individual thing. And one of the problems I think I find with this is usually you look at chips and you compare it to potato chips. Well, potato chips have quite a bit of fat in them. And I think that would be something that you may have to add to these, which would actually be done after it's dried. So once the chip is dried, then you would take it out and add your spices as well as maybe a little bit of shortening or a little bit of oil.
Thank you, Tim. I have another one. With the zucchini flour, was the squash peeled beforehand?
No, it wasn't.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe one or two, and then we'll continue. How about gray squash, also called Magda squash or Mexican squash? I guess the question would be, can you use that also?
Could you use that for what? For flour?
It didn't specify, so I'm wondering, was it
Well,
flour?
I haven't worked with that, but I assume that once you get it extremely dry, you can probably make a flour out of it.
Okay. Someone has written to us salt, chili powder, garlic powder, onion powder as seasonings. And Hitch, we'll finish with Hitch and move on, but Hitch has a question. And thank you for raising your hand. If you'd like to.
Yeah. Would Parmesan work? Because I feel like those flavors can really balance out well.
You're saying what? Parmesan cheese?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think, yeah, that might be a great thing to add to it. In other words, you have a very dry chip, and then you put that on, and maybe another flavor or two. That would be great.
But you'd
Okay.
have to add the cheese after it was dry, not
Right.
before you did the
No, not
dehydrate.
before. No,
Okay, I see.
we're
Already.
talking about something once it's already dried.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on right now. We
Thanks.
will get to all of theirs later. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. So now Sarah is going to talk to us about freezing zucchini. And I know there's at least one person here who will be extremely interested in what Sarah has to write or has to say.
Okay, no pressure there. Thank you so much for the introduction. One thing that I've learned is that to be successful with freezing zucchini, or I think any type of summer produce, you really want to think about how you use that vegetable first. So for zucchini, are you planning on using it for zucchini bread or muffins? Maybe in your home, you really like it in soups or steamed, like fresh steamed zucchini from the garden. You might want to do chunks for that because that's what you would want on your plate or in your soup. Some people do zucchini pasta with spirals. I do not have a spiralizer, so I will not be showing you how to do that, but I think that would be a really great way to use zucchini as well. I started doing this when I needed to be gluten-free for a while, so I created a way of using it for lasagna that required freezing. So that's why I started looking at this. So in that case, you're going to want to store your slices in this particular way. Your favorite recipe will also determine how much you want in each one of your packages. So if your zucchini bread recipe calls for 2 cups of shreds, then you want to make your packages that go in the freezer 2 cups of shreds, and that will be easiest for you. Then before you're going to bake, you just pull that out of the freezer, let it thaw for a bit, and you're ready to go. For soup, you might want to do 1 cup chunks, for example, or if you like it steamed, it would really be the same thing. Okay, next slide. So when we're freezing zucchini, the first thing we want to do is wash it thoroughly. I actually use soap because of those enzyme pieces, so I make sure I really get in there and do that. And then you're going to cut it in whatever type you want, shreds, slices, etc. In some cases, you'll want to blanch it to stop that enzymatic activity. And there is a great video that Master Food Preservers did on blanching that you could reference if you want to learn more about that. There is also a really good website with the National Home Canning that talks all about blanching. I'll put that in the chat a little bit later on. You'll measure the portions you want, put them in plastic bags that are rated for freezing. So one thing that I learned is that those freezing bags are super important. They're different thickness than regular sandwich bags. And if you've ever put really highly aromatic spices in a sandwich bag, you'll notice you can smell it outside the bag because air permeates a tiny bit. Freezer bags are thicker and you have less of that permeability, so it protects it more in the freezer. You'll also want to remove as much air as possible. Easiest to do by just putting the bag in a bowl of water. Obviously not the open part. The open part stays up and dry. But as soon as you put it in that bowl of water, the air just comes out because it's displaced and you can seal it up. Be sure you label and include your date and then lay it flat in your freezer. You can get a lot more volume if you have flat little packages. And I'll show you what I mean with the demonstration. And we're going to use it. Just remove it from the freezer, thaw it for something where you don't want it very watery. Press as much water out as possible and then use it. If the water is part of the recipe, like zucchini bread, you would retain the water. So it really depends on what you're doing. Okay, now I'm going to take you into my kitchen and show you a few things about freezing zucchini. I hope. So it should miraculously happen. Yes. So here is a zucchini that actually I got yesterday from the store because I used up all the zucchinis from my neighbors and I thought it was a cucumber, but it really is a zucchini. So some of them are not striped. This is the blossom end, and like with cucumbers, you're going to cut off a little bit more because this is where more enzymes are and you want to get rid of that. And then cut this piece off. In this case, I want to do an example with some shreds. So it's as simple as just taking your grater or a food processor or a mandolin or whatever you're comfortable using, and it grades very easily and quickly. And you'll grade as much as you need for that particular package. In my magic kitchen that I got from Julia Child, I have 2 cups of shreds right here. Imagine that. So I have my 2 cups of shredded zucchini. If I wanted to do chunks, I would just, chunk it up in the right size that I like. So I like steamed zucchini, so I just do sizes about like that. And in this case, I would blanch them before putting them in a plastic bag and freezing them because I want to keep that bright green color in particular, which is wonderful when it's January and really dreary out. For the zucchini that I like to do, you could do it in lots of different ways. You could simply cut rounds and you could make casserole type things out of that. Or what I do is I do long lengthwise cuts. I start with 1 cut like that, and then I flip it so I have a really stable zucchini on my cutting board, and I start slicing them this way. Now, one thing I do when I slice my zucchini noodles, I do lay them out on paper towels, and I do a light sprinkling of salt, and I leave them there for about 15 minutes, and you will see water beating up. I dry them as much as possible and then just lay them flat in a Ziploc bag. Another cost-cutting measure is buy a lot of them at the holidays when they go on sale in January. And then I will take my slices of zucchini, and I don't do anything fancy. I just lay them in, and I lay them in really flat, seal them up, label them, and you can do that. Now, when you pull it out of the freezer, if you're like me, you don't always remember to do it ahead of time. So I had these in the freezer. They're my lasagna noodles. And about 20 minutes before this started, I just put them in a bowl of warm water so they thawed very, very fast. But I want you to see how much water actually comes out. These were salted and pressed over and over until they were perfectly dry. Put them in the freezer, and I've got a good, I don't know, almost half a cup of water that's come out of them. And then I will just take them out of my bag when I'm making lasagna, lay them flat, and get even more water out of them. You can see how wet they are there. And that does lead to a different texture in the zucchini and makes for really good noodles, and then it's not watery. So that's what I do with that. And then to make our packets of shredded noodles, I use my canning funnel for this as well. And you can just put your shreds right like that, and then get them down into your Ziploc bag. At least for me, it usually works pretty well. And then I will have my 2 cups of shredded noodles here and ready to go. Now I will typically use water to displace the air, but in this case, I'll just push it over, get as much air out as I can. And then I will either make them flat like this for my freezer, or sometimes I'll do them totally this way. And then they freeze in basic rectangles, and it's super easy to store. And with that, I think we'll go to my last slide where I want to show you some examples of what I've done with my frozen zucchini. Thank you, Robin. So on the next slide, you can see sort of water coming out of the zucchini noodles. I make it using whatever you like to use. So when I was a vegan, I would have used my homemade nutritional yeast cheese or whatever cheeses you want. You could do like a Mexican style bake if you wanted to. this top side where it says frozen equals firm, that plate is standing up at about 45 degrees. It does not run. It's nice and firm lasagna. The bottom one was just using fresh lasagna. It was really soggy and runny. So I prefer the more firm version. And I think that's all I have about freezing zucchini.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah. Okay. I have a question coming in. And how long does the zucchini last in the freezer?
Well, I tend to use things for a long time, but they will tend to stay nice and fresh for about 6 months, so well into winter time.
Thank you. And that's it with questions on zucchini.
Excuse me, sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
Have you ever experimented with infused oils and salts?
And frozen zucchini? No. But I have experimented with infused oils and salts with other things. And one thing you could do is like an infused garlic oil that you put on zucchini, maybe grill it, and then you could freeze your grilled zucchini or anything you had left over. So there was that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds really good.
It does, doesn't it? I might make that tomorrow.
Thank you. I think that's all the raised hands and questions.
All right. Then we'll be able to move on to Dee, who is going to give us a great recipe and also talking about boiling water canning.
Thank you, Robin. So marmalade is actually a fruit spread that's made with pieces of fruit or peel that are suspended in a jelly. And I'm going to make a marmalade that's using the long cook method. It's one of the original preserving methods for making jams, which really relies on using the pectin that's available in the fruit that you're actually processing, as well as a high sugar content. You can do sugar-free versions using a different method with different pectins, but for this, we're using the natural pectin that's available in the oranges and lemons that we're going to incorporate in our marmalade. And so we have our ingredients. We have oranges, lemons, grated apple, ginger, and a large amount of zucchini. So there's about 5 cups of zucchini there. And then we have the really critical part for long cook is to take that pectin in the citrus and use that with the high concentration of sugar, because that acts as a preservative in the cooking process. When you boil it a long time, it helps to pull out the moisture out of the citrus and dehydrates the pathogens so they become inactive, and it allows you to get a nice thick gelled process. If you go to the next slide, please. So the first thing we did was to prepare the zucchini, and since most people don't know that there's zucchini in your marmalade, if you want to have it be a mystery marmalade that you can play a game with guests, I would peel the zucchini. You don't have to, but I peeled it, and then you grate it in either a food processor or a box grater, however. Also, we have to put in citrus for this particular recipe. The apple was grated, cored, and peeled and put through the grater. And with the citrus, we're only going to use the peel of the orange itself. And so you want to use either a vegetable peeler or a very, very sharp knife to get the zest on the outside without any of the white pith, which makes it bitter. So we're taking that only with the orange. With the lemon, we're actually not going to use the rind. So we're going to take our zest and we're going to make it very finely cut up, and we're going to put that into the marmalade itself. We're going to take the orange and the lemon, and we're going to supreme them and cut away the pith all the way around the different fruits. And then we're going to slice them up and chop them. And we're going to use all of the lemon juice and orange juice in the process itself. But we're going to take that pith and the peel that was left behind, and we're going to use that in a spice packet. So if you go to the next slide, we have in a nonstick pan all of our zucchini and sugar and lemon and orange juice and the orange rind. And then the rest of it, the zucchini, the pith, and then the lemon rind go into a piece of cheesecloth that you tie into a ball, and you put that into the pot and you cook the entire thing at a boil for about 45 minutes. This allows the sugar to combine with the fruit juices and creates a gel that will give you a nice marmalade there. I happen to do this at a higher altitude. It actually took me about 2 hours of cooking as opposed to 45 minutes. But in the long run, it will come to a nice gel stage. And if you go to the next slide, you can see on the upper left that it has created a nice solid product, something that's very spreadable. And you can tell that it's hit that gel by using a candy thermometer with the gel setting, or you can use a spoon and hold it up and see if long strings of syrup are coming off, then it's not gelled. Or you can take what I did and put a plate with the marmalade on it in a freezer for about 5 to 10 minutes and take it out, and then you hold the plate up, and if you don't have a lot of material running out of your marmalade, then it's gelled. And so that's what you can see here in the lower left. So if you go to the next slide, please. I was using a boiling water canner to process this, and I didn't happen to have my rack with me when I was making this. So you can actually make a rack at the bottom so that the jars don't touch the bottom of the canner and crack. You can take some of your jar lids and use twist ties that you get with vegetables at the grocery store to make a ring of these, and then you can set your jars on those. So I place my jars in the canner and cover them with water, and you want to heat it to a simmer. So they're hot jars, you're putting hot material into them and then sealing them up. You want to keep those jars in the hot water until you're ready to use them, and then take them out and put them on your surface for filling the jars. And you want to wash your lids in hot soapy water, rinse them well and dry. Now you don't have to actually boil the lids anymore. The gasket material works better if you just wash it in water. If you go to the next slide, please. You can see here now we're filling our sterilized jars for canning. And so we use a little funnel to help us get into the jar without spilling. And I ladled the hot marmalade into the hot jars, leaving about a 1/4 inch of headspace per the recipe. And so you can see in the upper right corner, I used a ruler. You can also get a headspace tool from the canning department of the grocery store. But you want to leave 1/4 inch between the top of the jar and the actual contents inside. Take a non-metallic utensil and try to go inside and make sure there are no bubbles left so you get uniform heat transfer, and then make sure that you're still at a 1/4 inch headspace. Wipe the rim really well with a wet paper towel so that you don't end up with any debris that could interrupt the seal there. And you can see 5 jars. I had enough for 4 jars canned, and the 5th jar is not a mason jar. It just went in the refrigerator for breakfast. We put the can lids on top in the center, and then put the ring on the outside and screw it down finger tight. So if you go to the next slide. Now we're going to process it in the boiling water canner. And here there are 2 methods of getting your jars into the hot water. One is on the left. I actually have silicone gloves that allow you to pick up the jar and put it into the canner, and you can actually get the hot water on you without getting burned. You can also use the next image where it shows that you can get a jar lifter. These also are available in the canning section at stores, and you pick it up and put it in. We want to make sure that the jars are covered by at least 1 to 2 inches of water, and you bring it to a boil, cover it, and make sure it's still at a boil the whole time, or you'll have to start the process over again with the timer. And you process it at sea level for about 10 minutes. Now, I was not at sea level when I canned these. I was at a much higher elevation. And so the air gets thinner as you go to higher elevation. The temperature that water boils at goes down. And as a result, you don't get as effective pathogen killing with the short time processing. So with every recipe, you'll find an adjustment for the amount of time that you actually need to process the material. So I was at 3,500 feet. I had to actually process it for approximately 20 minutes. So you can also find where your elevation is by going to what'smyelevation.com. And I believe it's in the chat, the link to that, but it's also in the handout that you'll get it at the end of the WebEx. Once you've processed it, you can take off the lid from the canner, turn off the heat, and wait for 5 minutes before removing the jars. And then take them out and put them on a towel on your countertop. And pretty quickly, you'll start to hear pop, pop, pop as the lids seal inside. But you don't want to disturb them for about 12 to 24 hours so you get a really good seal. Once you're past that point, you can remove the jar ring, and you can actually hold up your, you can see it here, but you can actually hold your jar up by the lid itself. And if it's well sealed, the two won't separate. So now you can label it and store the jar for long-term storage. And this is great on toast or on a cheese plate with crackers, in yogurt as a sweetener or filling for a cake. The other thing you can do, because you cannot tell that there is zucchini in this, it tastes just like a regular marmalade, is that you can give it to a hostess for a gift and ask them to tell you what that secret ingredient is. So you can label it as a mystery marmalade. And I can tell you, you'd be really hard pressed to tell there's zucchini in that. It's very tasty. Everyone loved it that we served it to the next morning. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marina for zucchini relish.
All right, Marina, take it away.
Thanks. We're going to wrap this up. Next slide. With a savory canned zucchini product. You've sort of seen the parade of different ways to preserve. And we're going to make a zucchini relish. This recipe is in the handout. It's actually pretty similar a process to making dill pickles, and you can use zucchini for that as well. And so that's a bonus recipe that you'll get in the handout. I've assembled my ingredients here. Next slide. So one pause here. As Tim mentioned, zucchini is a low acid fruit slash vegetable. And so in order to make it safe for canning, you saw that Dee was using large amounts of sugar. The main chemistry here for safety is the vinegar, which adds the acidity. And so you do have to have your vinegar of at least 5% acidity. They vary. Look at your label. Anything higher is fine. You can substitute other kinds of vinegar, but make sure it's at 5%. Options that do not affect the safety is you can add dried spices up to 1/4 of a teaspoon per half-pint jar. I actually threw a couple of little dried chili peppers into a couple of my jars because I wanted some spicy options. And another option, a completely optional, is that you can add some food-grade calcium chloride to your jars, and that helps sort of boost up the pectin firmness of the fruit, and so you'll get a little bit more crunch, even though you're doing a canning process. And that's used in lots of other things like beer making and cheese and some of the pectins. You only use a 1/16 of a teaspoon per half-pint jar, and so I have a lifetime supply now. All right, your steps. This is all in the handout. You can wash, chop, and measure your vegetables. You can see here I used a variety, including a sort of a globular one. I'm not sure if that technically is a zucchini, but it certainly is a green summer squash, and it worked just fine. Next slide. Once you do the chop, you're going to salt the vegetables and soak it in water for a couple of hours and then rinse it and drain it. That will pull out some of the moisture and give it a little bit more firmness. Notice I used a fairly coarse dice here. I wanted to sort of see how that worked in a relish. You can go with a much finer grind the way that you would see sort of a generic commercial pickle relish, and that is fine as well. Next slide. So you prepare then your vinegar mixture, which is just vinegar with sugar and spices. Again, I withheld my hot chili pepper because I only wanted some of the jars to be hot. Once that comes to a simmer, you add your drained vegetables and simmer for another 10 minutes. In the meantime, notice I'm heating my jars so that they'll be warm in order to do the warm pack. Next slide. I've assembled all of my various ingredients, and Dee just explained how you pack warm product into warm jars. Here, I used exactly the same kind of process. I did add my chili peppers to a couple of the jars, and I also added my calcium chloride at this stage. You just put a little pinch in the jar. Next slide. I just wanted to pause and brag a little bit about my Christmas present, which is this fancy skirted canning funnel, but it also has the headspace measures on it. This recipe calls for a 1/2 inch headspace. You do want to follow your recipe for this. They do vary in the amount of headspace required, but it is designed to make sure that you get an adequate seal. Next slide. And then we're going to can this. The processing time, if you're 1,000 feet or below at sea level to 1,000 feet, is 10 minutes. Notice here I'm using an atmospheric steam canner. And so I just place my jars right into that above the simmering liquid in the bottom of the canner. Next slide. I just want to pause and talk about how do you decide when you start your timer for this. In a boiling water canner, it's a rolling boil. Here, you're going to want to have the entire dome of your steam canner filled with that steam. And so the bath of steam is really like putting it into a boiling water bath. Um, so you'll see there's a little vent hole in the top of your atmospheric steam canner, a nice steady stream of steam coming out indicates that it's full. Some canners include this little gauge on the top. That's really just to give you an idea that it's warmed up. It is not actually reliable as knowing that you've come to steam. The gold standard that is recommended for safety is that you check your temperature by just using an instant read digital thermometer, and I just put that right into the vent hole, make sure it's not touching anything inside the canner, and I get it to my boiling temperature at the altitude that I'm at. Next slide. I just wanted to pause. You can, of course, do this recipe in a regular boiling water canner. The tip here is just you can always substitute an atmospheric steam canner for a boiling water canner in any of the approved and tested recipes, except you can't process for longer than 45 minutes in an atmospheric steam canner because you don't want your water to boil all the way down and run out because then you lose your temperature. And there is no testing of stacking of jars inside of that dome. So those little bitty short canning jars, even though you could stack them, we don't have any tested evidence that that is adequate. Otherwise, I actually love the atmospheric steam canner. It's got a lower lip, and so it's easier to get the jars in and out. It also comes to temperature much, much quicker because you just have much less liquid in there, so it's much easier to handle, and I find it's a faster process. Next slide. And once your time is done, you turn off the heat underneath your steam canner, allow it to cool down for 3 to 5 minutes with the lid on. You want that gradual cool down, no sudden temperature changes. Make sure that when you lift the lid, you're pointing away from yourself so the steam that comes out does not burn you. And then, just as Dee said, you lift it up, remove it, put it on a towel, let it sit for 12 to 24 hours, and you will hear that popping for the sweet sound of the popping of a good seal. Next. So serving ideas, this tastes basically indistinguishable from commercial pickle relish. So you can use it on hot dogs and sandwiches just the way you would, or in a potato salad, or in your deviled egg recipe. You can put it in spreads and dips. Here, because I have the coarser cut, I was experimenting with meats. There's a pork tenderloin there. There's a grilled salmon on the other side. It just makes a nice sort of sweet, sour accompaniment to various dishes. Next. And just one last bonus comment. I had a lot of leftover zucchini and a lot of leftover vinegar liquid after I made this recipe. And so I just decided to make that into refrigerator pickles. Literally, I just cleaned some jars. They don't have to be canning jars, but I had a lot of them lying around. If you sterilize it, your refrigerator pickle will last a little longer. I just packed my washed and cut zucchini into a jar. You could use stems, you could use rounds, and then I just poured that hot spiced vinegar mixture that I had over it to cover. Doesn't take very much because your jar is mostly filled with the zucchini. And then I labeled it, stored it in the refrigerator, and like with any refrigerator pickle, you consume it in 3 to 4 weeks. And so that's what I did with my leftovers. I think we can take questions for any of us now.
Thank you, Marina. That was wonderful. Here's a question for you. They wanted to know, was that a 1/4 teaspoon of dry spice per half pint jar? And is that true for all canning recipes?
Basically, for canning recipes, you can vary the dry spices. And the rule of thumb is you can vary it by about a 1/4 teaspoon per half pint jar. You don't have to go that high. Don't go crazy and do more than that, or change more than that. You can leave things out in the spice realm for recipes if you really don't like, like I don't know, the taste of turmeric. You can omit that again, just within that variance.
Thank you. The back to the flour from zucchini, there was a question, and sorry for the late answering, but approximately how much flour do you get from an average zucchini?
Remember that the zucchini has 95% water. So when you dry it out, you really reduce that weight considerably. And so you can actually say that you're only going to get 5% of the zucchini that you process. So I guess that would be something that you could use. Uh, I went through a number of different zucchini in order to get enough to run a small amount, like a half a cup of flour to add in my various uh, products that I was baking.
Thank you, Earl. And I have another question here. Can you use less sugar in the marmalade recipe, the zucchini marmalade recipe?
So for this particular recipe, it was a long cook method, and so you really need to have the full amount of sugar specifically for this recipe because you're using the sugar over a 45-minute time frame to pull the water out and actually release the pectins so you can make the gel. However, if you use a different type of pectin and add it to it, there's one called low methoxyl pectin. It's a modified pectin. Uh, they're one of the brands that is representative of this is Pomona's pectin, and it uses a calcium byproduct to actually work with the pectin to create the gel. So you're using the actual calcium as opposed to the natural pectin in the fruit. And with that particular process, you can actually dramatically reduce the sugar. You can use alternatives. You can use honey. You need to use a trusted recipe, but Papona's pectin actually has quite a few different recipes on their website for using the calcium gel type of processing. And so that will be in the handout. And I think Mary has the link for that as well.
Thank you, and I'll get it in there. And one last question. Where was it? I don't have an atmospheric steam canner, as I heard Marina speak, or a boiling water can. Do I have to buy one of them?
Absolutely not. You can just use a large pasta pot or, anything that's deep and that you can put boiling water in, have any kind of a rack, and Dee showed you how you can make your own rack if you need to even. But put a rack on the bottom because you don't want your glass to be touching the actual bottom of the pan and be right next to the heat source. And then you have to be able to have water, boiling water to cover whatever size jar you're using by at least an inch. But you can make your own boiling water canner. And so if you've boiled pasta, you probably have the tools to be able to do this.
But if you're going steam canner, atmospheric steam canner, you have to buy one because it has the dome and the vent in the appropriate place. But
It's
Yeah.
true.
boiling water canner, we're good. Well, thank you everybody for your terrific presentations and for all of you for coming to our workshop tonight. So we have other online delivery programs coming up. We've got tomato basics on the 15th, and then we've got one on hot peppers on September 1st. You can look at our past class recordings as well with the link that's on your screen. You can also drop into our Ask a Master Food Preserver Zoom hour on the second Wednesday each month from 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific time. We have an English one, and then the fourth Wednesday of each month, 1 to 2 p.m. Now we have a Spanish Ask a Master Food Preserver. The next one is August 12th. It's in English. You can also submit a written question to our helpline. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter. It is chock full of recipes and little known facts and quizzes. You can like us on Facebook and Instagram. And also, finally, we need your input. When you leave this Zoom, a brief survey is going to pop up in your browser. Please complete it. It's going to help us improve. But maybe more importantly, when you submit that survey, the pop-up acknowledgement is going to include a link to the class handout with the recipes and the tips. So thank you all so much for your time and your interest, and happy preserving.